Well, this feels more like a Tesla-only story when you look at just this fall in EV sales for them, that they're suffering across Europe, down 45% in January. The wider EV market in Europe up 37%, so rivals are catching up and performing.
They didn't shoot. They didn't threaten. They didn't make loud statements at conferences. Just one document, one stamp, and America's largest auto giant began to crumble. It wasn't an explosion. It was extinction. Slow, cold, calculated. While Washington threatened the world with new tariffs, Canada silently pulled the economic trigger, and the world changed.
I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, every department in our government. He's ruining, and he's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world.
In just 48 hours, Tesla's supply chain began to crack. Lithium didn't arrive. Nickel was stuck at the border. Aluminum arrived in unusable condition. Factories in Nevada and California ground to a halt, feeling what real dependence was like for the first time in years. Elon Musk could only post memes on Twitter, while investors quietly sold shares and competitors negotiated raw material supplies for years to come. America, which had proudly proclaimed its technological leadership, was brought to its knees not by missiles, but by Canada's refusal to deliver a single shipment.
Teslas are being torched across the country. Dealerships shot up and set on fire. Spray paint to vandalize and make a statement. People in Southern California are getting notes on their Teslas, calling them complicit Nazis for owning electric cars.
But Canada didn't stop there. This was no accidental move. It was a plan. Every pause in deliveries was calculated. While American dealers desperately searched for parts and buyers couldn't get the cars they had paid for, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney quietly held meetings with European and Asian diplomats. And suddenly the narrative changed. No one was asking why Canada was punishing America anymore. The world began to ask, what if the US was the one playing dirty? What if the trade order built by Washington was just a convenient illusion?
Running around on stage with a Tesla stock price, where the stock price had gone in half. And he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like who derives joy?
3 weeks later, European car makers began cancelling orders in the United States. France rolled back partnerships. Germany invested in Asia. Britain signed exclusive pacts, deliberately excluding American companies. At the same time, in Mexico, just 40 miles from Texas, Chinese auto giants were completing the construction of new factories. Biden Neo electric cars, unknown to anyone yesterday, were now parked in American supermarkets, cheap, reliable, and most importantly, affordable.
Over the last couple of months. But the other thing that this could potentially be is an attempt at readjustment or correction by the Trump administration, in that one of Trump's closest kind of allies and supporters, and someone who's clearly very influential in the administration, is coming out to kind of push back against the recently implemented policies. So I'm thinking, or maybe hopeful is the right word, that this might be a signal that the administration is considering walking back some of those policies.
And then something happened that even the White House did not expect. Trump's own supporters turned against him. People who believed in American manufacturing were losing their jobs, their homes, and their cars. Stores were emptying. Factories fell silent. And when Carney merely hinted that he might reconsider oil and energy exports to the US, the price of a gallon of gasoline in some states jumped to $6. Electricity became scarce. And then the question sounded different. Not will we win this trade war, but can we survive without those we have grown accustomed to ignoring?
371. Most were saying 350 to 360. Now they're coming in at 336,068. Production of 362,615. So for some point of reference here, you're going back to Q2, maybe Q1 of 2022 in terms of the last time that they had production this or deliveries this low for one quarter. So again, Tesla deliveries worse than expected at just over 336,000 deliveries in the first quarter. Guys, I'll send it back to you.
That's horrible. Can I just ask Phil, how about the Cybertruck? How's that doing? You got a little inventory there in the Cybertruck?
This is not just a story about Tesla. It is a story about the fall of an empire, about how a country that considered itself the center of the world suddenly discovered that without allies, without workers, without respect, no flags or slogans could save its industry. Because in the new game, it's not the one who shouts the loudest who wins, but the one who knows in advance where you hurt. It didn't start with loud headlines, but with a short press release from Ottawa that almost no one noticed. There were no breaking news reports, urgent White House briefings, or alarming charts on Bloomberg. Just one message: Canada is temporarily suspending exports of strategic minerals, except for shipments to countries with mutually transparent trade and climate policies. For most countries, this sounded like another step in the fight for sustainability. For the United States, it was the beginning of a systemic collapse.
That's from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. People just choosing with their wallets to not buy Teslas because of that Musk-Trump association. And actually here in London, an activist group called Everyone Hates Elon actually have been hacking bus stop signs with posters. I actually passed one yesterday. First, I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but it said the words 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. Illusion here, 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or something. But this poster was alluding to the start of World War II, and the image was of Musk giving that hand salute that we saw at Trump's inauguration that many have attacked as a Nazi gesture. Musk, though, has neither admitted or denied what he was doing. But we're seeing the knock-on effect of that anti-Musk anger across Europe and in terms of sales.
Tesla was the first to suffer. Its supply chain, honed to perfection, operated in an almost fully automated mode. Lithium from Alberta, nickel from mines in Manitoba, aluminum from British Columbia, everything arrived on time. Musk built his empire on the principle of fewer warehouses and faster speed. On paper, it was perfect. In practice, it was vulnerable. When the first shipment of lithium failed to cross the border, no one panicked. When the second shipment didn't arrive, the Nevada plant had to slow down production. When components for battery assembly didn't arrive in California 3 days later, the engineering department was already drafting internal instructions to suspend production lines. Everything happened quickly and quietly. There were no catastrophic accidents or loud emergency shutdowns. First, the deliveries disappeared, then the deadlines, then the rhythm. Production windows shifted by 14 hours, then by a day. Battery assemblers began to stand guard at the gates, waiting for any components to arrive. Managers lowered standards and redistributed what was left. Batteries were assembled by hand from 3 weeks' worth of leftovers. Some Tesla models had to be assembled without climate control. There were simply no microchip units.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
Musk, as always, opted for open and bold rhetoric. He posted jokes about a Canadian caffeine boycott and assured investors that he had found new partners in Australia. However, panic reigned within Tesla. The logistics department updated routes and checked customs documents every day. An emergency mission was organized in South America to renegotiate contracts with Chilean and Argentine companies, but most of the mines were already tied to competitors such as Rivian, Hyundai, and Stellantis. One former Tesla top manager, who wished to remain anonymous, told reporters, "We lost control of raw materials within 5 days. It's like a hospital running out of oxygen, not immediate death, but a matter of time."
Outperforming as well in some cases, doing better than Tesla. And you just have to think, how much more is this a sustained issue for Tesla going forward, given the fact that you have Elon Musk, who's been very forthright in his opinions, particularly weighing in on politics, particularly in Europe. We've just had the European elections, which Musk has been very focused on. But across the piece, when you look at the performance for Tesla in Europe, it's not just in small countries. A lot of countries where Tesla has been performing badly, including in Germany, in the UK, where it has been lagging, and Spain as well.
However, Tesla is just the tip of the iceberg. The problems were systemic. General Motors, Ford, Lucid all were tied to the same components. America did not produce enough lithium, did not produce enough cathodes, and could not quickly replace Canadian shipments of raw materials. On the sixth day, Ford informed dealers that deliveries of the F-150 Lightning would be cut by 60%. Internal messages from Stellantis instructed dealers to limit production of electric Jeeps and divert resources to hybrid models that require fewer batteries. It looked like a tactical move, but in essence it was a step back several years. A Chevrolet dealership in Ohio was the first to raise the alarm. Customers had been waiting for their cars for 10 days instead of 3. At first, managers blamed logistics, then border delays. But customers were angry. In Miami, the director of one of Ford's largest dealerships went out to customers in person to explain. He was booed. He later admitted, "We promised 18 cars and received 3. 2 weeks later, the situation exploded. Dealers began to hide information about the delays in hopes of not losing customers, but this only intensified the anger. A spontaneous protest took place in Illinois, where angry customers gathered at the GM regional office to demand compensation for the delayed deliveries. In Michigan, salespeople began offering old models at the price of new ones just to show some activity.
Worse than expected, 336 and 68 vehicles, 336,068 vehicles delivered in the first quarter for Tesla. For a point of reference, the street was expecting, the street account was expecting, based on analyst expectations.
Meanwhile, in the south, in Mexico, Chinese electric cars were arriving in containers, being unloaded, assembled, and within a week appearing in the warehouses of American dealers working through parallel imports. One such warehouse in Texas sold 43 seal cars in a single day, affordable, well-built, and, most importantly, available. One buyer told local news in an interview, "I don't care where it's made. It's here. And my money is real." Let Musk catch up. In the third week of the war with Canada, Bloomberg analysts officially stated, a chain reaction has begun. Production is stalling, retailers are in panic mode, and competitors are ready. This no longer looked like a temporary crisis. It was a blow to the foundation of the entire American industrial pyramid. Within the White House administration, there was talk of priority mobilization of infrastructure, and Republicans proposed subsidizing domestic lithium production, even though even the most optimistic forecasts predicted that the first deposits would not be developed before 2028.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
They're doing what they should be doing, perhaps, for the European Union, but it does create ill will. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them.
Canada also striking back with new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods, mostly steel and aluminum, but also computers and sporting goods.
At that moment, the reality became clear. The U.S. no longer controlled critical supplies for its automotive industry. And it wasn't just about raw materials, it was a question of management, preparation, and foresight. While agreements were being silently edited in Toronto, Washington was arguing about who was to blame. Musk was losing ground, and every new day without parts brought his factories closer to a complete shutdown. And then the second wave began, not a production wave, but a social one. Americans dreaming of a new car couldn't afford one for the first time in decades. Prices were rising. Delivery dates were disappearing. And in empty showrooms, a new anxiety was born. If we can't build a car, how are we going to build a future? Okay, here's the continuation, the third and fourth points of the plan, in one piece, about 1,000 words, with a ratio of 70% facts and 30% dramatized details.
Tesla shares have slumped by more than 9% amid a fall in sales in Europe. The electric vehicle maker posted lower sales across 5 European countries, including France and the UK. Joining us now to discuss this is CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio. Remi, why do we believe these sales are dropping? What's driving that?
Sure. Well, Errol, basically what Elon Musk has been talking about over the past, say, few months, ever since Donald Trump's election back to the White House, that has been fueling this anger, this frustration, some even say disgust towards Musk, and they're taking it out on Tesla. Tesla now feeling the pain. But because of what's happening here in Europe, Tesla sales fell by nearly half across the continent just last month, 45%.
The next step was what the White House would later call a visa-free invasion. In northern Mexico, in the city of Montemorelos, just an hour's drive from the Texas border, Chinese company BYD began construction of an electric vehicle factory. Just 8 months later, the first models destined for the US market rolled off the assembly line. Thanks to NAFTA, they could cross the border without paying duties. This was a legislative loophole that Trump had called minor back in 2018, but now it had become a Trojan horse. While Tesla's Austin plant was idle due to a shortage of batteries, compact Xpeng crossovers and neo-electric sedans began arriving from Mexico. They weren't just cheaper, they were available. Their advertising campaigns were launched in collaboration with American YouTube influencers, independent media, and even trade unions that had previously criticized the foreign auto industry. The idea was simple. These cars provide jobs for Mexicans, do not displace American brands, and fill the gap caused by Washington's inefficiency. Tesla, General Motors, and Ford were unable to respond quickly. They did not have alternative supply chains in place. Their reserves were quickly dwindling. One Ford executive said in a backroom meeting, "We have a product we can't make, in a country that can't build the infrastructure and has lost the allies that can help." These words later leaked to the press and became a meme on Reddit on Make America Again. The irony was that China did not even appear to be the aggressor. It did not declare economic war. It did not renounce agreements. It simply offered solutions while the US continued to issue slogans. And these solutions, whatever one's opinion of them, worked.
Well, you will hear people over in Europe say the new Model Y, the Juniper, could be a difference maker. But that's been in that market now for more than a month. And you would think that you would see a greater snapback if it's going to be a difference maker. Look, we could be wrong. It could be a difference maker once you get the sales for April, May, and June. But when you have a country like Norway, I think the sales were down something like 11% there. I mean, that's a very savvy EV consumer in Norway. And that's long been a strength for Tesla. Very small market, not huge volume, but I think almost all of the vehicles they sell there are electric. And they embraced Tesla long before others. And, you know, the reports there are not encouraging.
As shifts were cut in Detroit and test drives of new models were halted in San Francisco, Chinese factories in Mexico were hiring new employees. Some American specialists who were laid off from Tesla factories began to switch to contracts with Chinese manufacturers, not for ideological reasons, but because there was money and stability there. One former engineer from Nevada admitted in an interview with CNN, "I never thought I would work for a Chinese company, but I have a mortgage, and they have batteries." By 2025, there were already 6 Chinese assembly plants operating in the US market, 4 of which were located in the border zone. BYD launched a marketing campaign with the slogan, "Reliable, affordable, ready now." And although Washington tried to stem the flow, change the rules, and close loopholes, it was too late. China walked through an open door left unguarded during years of political illusions. Excellent. Here are the 5th and 6th points. Continuing in the same style, about 1,000 words, 70% facts, 30% artistic embellishment.
We've accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years. And we are just getting started.
He praised all the domestic actions he has taken so far on immigration.
And I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country.
And spending cuts.
We are draining the swamp. It's very simple.
But what turned out to be even worse was something that no one could have foreseen, a massive loss of manpower. For decades, American industry had ignored a systemic crisis in the skilled trades. Welders, electricians, assemblers, and foundry workers, professions that are the backbone of manufacturing, were disappearing. The average age of a skilled auto mechanic exceeded 56. Training centers were closed, and colleges were reoriented toward IT. Manual labor became uncool.
And now this mistake has become fatal. Factories couldn't hire people. Job ads offering $38 an hour with relocation bonuses went unanswered. In one Ohio county, General Motors started training people right in a supermarket just to lure anyone in, but it was too late. There weren't enough people, and those who were there were overworked. Skilled workers worked 12-hour shifts and 2 shifts. The rate of workplace injuries doubled. Young people didn't want to work. There was no one to train them. Amid the growing collapse across the country, new voices began to be heard. The same voices that had previously waved MAGA flags and believed in the return of America. A viral video of a man from a Kentucky factory saying he can't pay his mortgage garnered 20 million views in a day. Facebook groups called America First began posting questions such as, "Where are our jobs now?" Radio stations in Pennsylvania and Missouri received dozens of live calls from former Trump supporters accusing him of betraying workers. Even Fox News, which had previously been staunchly supportive of the White House, ran a report on an abandoned factory in Tennessee where Tesla electric motors were once assembled.
Hey, Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will, of course, be the surveillance video. And investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off. And 16 cars burned in this fire. And right now, investigators don't know what caused it.
Amid the energy shock, another tragedy unfolded, the final and perhaps most painful one. Americans lost faith in their automotive dream. New cars cost an average of more than $50,000. A basic sedan cost $35,000, $40,000. Even used cars cost as much as new ones did 3 years ago. People could no longer afford a car. And without a car in America, you are isolated. School buses do not reach most suburbs. Public transportation in rural areas consists of 1 route per day. Car diagnostics cost $300. Brake replacement costs $600. And the wait is a month. One salesman in Arkansas said in an interview, "People call us and ask not for a new car, but for any car, as long as it runs, and no one can help." It wasn't just manufacturing that collapsed, their culture collapsed. In a country where the car was a symbol of freedom, dignity, and progress, it has now become an unaffordable luxury. This wasn't a collapse caused by war. It was a slow but inevitable decline. And the question was no longer who is to blame. The question became, do we still have a chance?